You ever hear your own name from a stranger's mouth and feel the temperature drop? That was the moment the world cracked, just a little, when I opened the front door. It was a Tuesday. Because of course it was. All the worst days start quietly and land like bricks. The guy on my porch was tall, nervous, and had eyes that looked too familiar to be comfortable. "Mr. Adam Keller?" he asked. "That's me." He extended a hand. "I'm Eli. Eli Brenner. I'm your son." Now, I'd graded 1,000 essays in my life. I taught Shakespeare to teenagers who thought Hamlet was just a bad omelet. But nothing prepared me for that line. Not because it was impossible, but because it wasn't. Jessica Brenner. College. A summer romance that ended with August. I'd left for a different school before the leaves had time to turn. I turned to Monica, my wife of 20 years, who was still in the kitchen. "This is Eli," I said, carefully. "He says he's my son." The dish towel dropped before I could blink. "You're what?" she hissed. Not to Eli. To me. The whole room turned brittle. The only thing louder than the silence was the memory of that summer with Jessica, her laugh, the freckles, the cheap beer under campus lights. "It's not a prank," Eli said. "I brought this." He pulled out a folded photograph. There I was, arms slung over Jessica, both of us grinning like we owned the sky. "My mother passed last year," Eli added. "Cancer. Her final wish was for me to find you." Monica didn't yell, didn't scream. She just iced over, like a lake sealing itself before the first snowfall. "Pack a bag," she said. "You're leaving tonight." I tried to explain. "I didn't know." "Don't lie to me, Adam." It wasn't a fight. It was an eviction. By 9:28 p.m., I was parked across from the Holiday Inn Express, still wearing the shirt Monica bought me last Christmas. I didn't knock on Eli's door yet. I just sat, watched the clock, wondered how a man could lose 20 years of his life in a single Tuesday. And the wildest part? That wasn't even the worst betrayal waiting for me. The next morning felt like waking up in someone else's life. You know that moment when a dream fades and you think, "Thank God that wasn't real?" Except this wasn't a dream. This was reality with motel linens and a scratchy bar of soap. Eli and I sat across from each other at the continental breakfast. He poured himself cereal like we weren't strangers, like his presence hadn't just detonated my marriage. "So what happens now?" he asked, his spoon clinking against the bowl. I took a sip of motel coffee. "DNA test, for starters. Then I guess we figure out what we missed." He nodded. "No drama. Just facts." Kid had composure. Probably got that from Jessica. After breakfast, I drove back to the house, not to see Monica, just to pick up a few things she hadn't thrown on the porch. I half expected to find my clothes burning in the yard. Instead, I found something worse. A man was standing on our front steps, laughing with Monica. Khakis. Designer sneakers. A watch that screamed midlife crisis, but with style. I stayed in the car and watched. He handed her a coffee. She touched his arm. It wasn't the touch that broke me. It was the timing. One night. I'd been gone one night. I drove off before either of them saw me. Drove with the kind of calm that only comes when you're too stunned to feel. Later, Eli asked if I wanted to grab lunch. I lied and said I had errands. What I really did was park at a rest stop and stare at a bottle of ibuprofen in the glove box for 43 minutes, trying to decide if I was feeling a headache or heartbreak. Around sunset, Monica texted. First message since the night she exiled me. It read, "We need to talk. There are things you don't know." I almost laughed. There are things I don't know? Honey, you don't even know the half of it. We met at a diner off Route 14. Neutral ground, her suggestion. She sat in a corner booth with perfect posture and a look that said this wasn't an apology, this was a negotiation. I slid into the seat across from her. "You said there are things I don't know." She didn't blink. "You really didn't know about Eli?" "No," I said. "And I wouldn't have married you if I had." She nodded slowly. Like that answer gave her permission to drop the next weight. "I've been seeing someone," she said. Just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. She delivered the news like she was reading off a grocery list. I didn't flinch. "The guy on the porch?" She looked surprised. "You saw him?" Hard to miss. A beat of silence. Then, "His name's David. We've been talking for a while." Define a while. 8 months. 8 months. I stared at the laminated menu like it held the answers. "So while I was coming home from work, grading papers, making dinner, you were falling in love with a guy named David?" She looked down at her coffee. "It didn't start like that." Of course it didn't. They never do. That's when she pulled out the envelope, slid it across the table like a contract. Inside, printed texts, Screenshots, emails. I wanted you to see this, she said, so you'd understand it wasn't about sex. I didn't touch the paper. You cheated, Monica. Whether it was emotional or physical or done through smoke signals. You cheated. She didn't argue. Just said, and now you've got a son. So I guess we're even. I almost laughed. Even? That kid didn't grow up with me. He didn't destroy a marriage. He didn't kiss me in the morning and David at night. Her expression didn't crack. You always were better at being wounded than I was. I stood. And you always needed a mirror more than a husband. As I walked out, I realized something. I wasn't mad. Not really. I was free. What I'd thought was a betrayal was just the end of a lie. And honestly, it was about time someone turned the lights on. The motel room was colder that night, though the thermostat said 72. I lay there staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to the tick of the mini-fridge like it was keeping time for a life that no longer fit me. Monica's face stayed in my head, not angry, just eerily calm. The kind of calm you only see in people who've already moved on. And that's what hit me hardest. She had moved on. While I was memorizing Eli's cereal preferences and pretending this wasn't a total freefall, she'd been nesting emotional throw pillows with a man named David. I didn't cry. Not my style. Never has been. But I did what most men in their 40s do when their life burns down around them. I went to Home Depot. I walked the aisles like it was church. Something about fluorescent lights and the smell of lumber makes you feel like you're still in control, even if all you're holding is a plunger and a pack of light bulbs. I didn't need either, but that wasn't the point. I bought a toolbox. Not because I needed tools, but because it felt like something a man with a plan would do. Even if that plan was still just noise in the back of my skull. That afternoon, Eli texted. You okay? I stared at the message longer than I should have. The kid had known me 3 days and already picked up on my silence. I will be, I replied. Let's grab dinner. Your pick. He chose a ramen spot with neon lights and techno music. We sat at a corner table while he slurped noodles and told me about his high school robotics team. I built a drone once that could flip pancakes, he said proudly. You do realize that makes you dangerously close to becoming a Marvel side character, right? He laughed, and something about that laugh made the weight in my chest shift. Not disappear, but shift. Halfway through dinner, he said, she didn't want me to find you. I looked up. Jessica. Yeah. Said you probably had a family. Said I'd just complicate your life. I stirred my broth. She wasn't wrong. She also said you were the only man she ever loved. I stopped stirring. Her words, he added quickly, like he didn't want to take credit for the grenade he just rolled across the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. It was the kind of sentence that sinks in quiet and doesn't leave room for dessert. We parted with a handshake that lingered just long enough to feel like something more. Back at the motel, I opened the toolbox, took out the hammer, held it like it meant something. Like I was building a future with wood and nails instead of unraveling a past with text messages and silence. I had no idea what to do with my life. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to Monica's tired eyes or David's smug khakis or a kitchen full of things I bought now claimed by someone else's laughter. Instead, I started looking for a place. Not an apartment. A home. A blank slate. A reset button with a garage. 3 days later, I found one. 2 bedrooms. Faded brick. Lawn that looked like it gave up some time around Nixon. But it was quiet. Beautifully, unapologetically quiet. I signed the papers without blinking. Eli helped me move in. He brought pizza and sarcasm and more boxes than I asked for. Somewhere between setting up the Wi-Fi and assembling an IKEA bookcase that required a degree in Scandinavian engineering, he asked, So what now? Now, I said, handing him a wrench. Now we figure out how to live in the aftermath without letting it define us. He smirked. That sounds like a fortune cookie. I nodded. It's also my new life motto. That night, after he left, I stood in the living room, staring at the bare walls and empty shelves. No wedding photos. No anniversary clocks. No evidence that I ever spent 2 decades living someone else's life. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I smiled. Because there's a special kind of peace that comes when the noise finally stops. When the lies leave the room. When the silence you feared turns out to be freedom wearing a quiet disguise. I slept better that night than I had in a year. But don't get me wrong. This story doesn't end in healing. It doesn't end in therapy or forgiveness or some heart-to-heart on a rain-soaked porch. No, that comes later. What comes next? Revenge. Not the loud, messy kind. The clean kind. The kind you orchestrate with a steady hand and a heart that's done waiting for apologies. And I had just started planning mine. Monica emailed me. Subject line, David's staying over tonight. Just so you're aware. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because that line told me everything I needed to know. She didn't write to provoke a fight. She wasn't warning me out of decency. No, Monica was doing what she always did best, controlling the narrative. Just so you're aware. Like I was still part of her boardroom, still owed meeting minutes and passive-aggressive updates. That sentence wasn't for me. It was for her. A preemptive strike in case I decided to make noise later. But I wasn't making noise. I was collecting receipts. I had a USB drive labeled Monica and David, Volume 1. Catchy, right? I hadn't meant to become a digital spy. It started innocently enough, checking our shared calendar one night to see if she'd removed our anniversary reminder. She had. But curiosity has a nasty way of evolving into strategy. And when you've spent years helping your son with password management, you learn a thing or two about weak spots. So I logged in. Not to her email, too obvious. To our shared cloud. The one she never remembered we used to sync photos just in case. And there it was. Dozens of images. Candids, selfies, screenshots from their little couple's hikes. Monica in yoga pants and aviators, kissing David in front of some waterfall. Same one we visited for our 10th anniversary. Poetic. There were text backups too. From her phone. She must have reinstalled the sync app during a reset. Her words, and her tone. He doesn't suspect a thing. He still thinks we're just friends. I think Adam knows. But he won't do anything. He never does. She was right. I hadn't done anything. Until now. I copied every file. Every date-stamped image. Every flirty exchange and fake excuse. Then I saved them in 3 places, a flash drive, an encrypted cloud folder, and a printed packet labeled with an all-too-familiar nickname, Attorney G, Winners. Because if she was going to try and divide up our life like pie slices, I wanted to make sure the court saw the whole recipe. But revenge? It wasn't just about legal leverage. It was about reclaiming reality. So I started small. First, I called our old friend group. The couples we used to have dinners with, the ones Monica still sent holiday cards to like we hadn't shattered. I didn't rant or beg for sympathy. I just told the truth. With timestamps. She left the night Eli showed up, I'd say. And David? Yeah, he was already in the picture. I didn't need drama. Just facts. Let them do the math. Next, I visited our financial advisor. Monica never really paid attention to the numbers. She trusted me to handle all that boring stuff. I'd helped her open a separate retirement fund years ago, encouraged her to have her own accounts. She never realized that kindness could turn surgical. When the advisor asked what I wanted to do, I didn't blink. Split it, I said. Reallocate anything joint. And start a trust. For who? He asked. For Eli. He nodded like he knew better than to ask questions. When I got home, I found a message on my phone from Monica. No greeting. No fluff. Why are people calling me asking if I cheated? This is between us, Adam. Be civil. Civil, that word again. The last refuge of someone who spent years being casually cruel, expecting silence in return. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Eli. Want to help me build a bookshelf? I asked. He was there within the hour. He didn't ask why I suddenly cared about a bookshelf. But when I handed him the hammer, I said, this is what building something honest looks like. He grinned. You're starting to sound like a motivational speaker. Don't get used to it. Halfway through, I asked, do you miss her? Your mom. Eli paused, eyes on the level in his hand. Every day, he said. But she wasn't perfect. She lied a lot. Said it was to protect me, but it always felt like it was to protect herself. Yeah, I said. I know the type. After he left, I stood in the middle of my quiet house, a place where nothing echoed except truth. And that's when I made the final move. I drafted a letter. Short. Sharp. Delivered with the same cold clarity she'd handed me the keys to my own exile. Monica. You wanted me gone. Congratulations, you got that part. What you didn't count on was me taking the silence with me and turning it into strategy. You don't get to control the story anymore. Not with friends. Not in court. Not with that smug little voice of yours that says it wasn't that bad. You cheated. Emotionally. Physically. Repeatedly. And I have the receipts. I'm not interested in drama. I'm interested in truth. I'm not staying quiet anymore. You left me first. I just finally caught up. Adam, I didn't send it. Not yet. But I printed it. folded it into an envelope, and slid it inside the front cover of a book I once bought her, The Art of Mindful Living. Fitting, don't you think? She never read it. But now, she might finally open a page. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of silence from Monica, which, for her, wasn't normal, it was tactical. She didn't reach out after the last message. Didn't send a follow-up or a guilt text with just a period to signal her emotional Morse code. That wasn't her style. No, this was her disappearing act. The pause before a counterstrike. And sure enough, it came. I found it on a Thursday morning, an envelope in my mailbox with no stamp. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in that looping, overconfident script I used to find charming when we were 29 and pretending we knew what the hell we were doing. Inside, an invitation. Printed. Embossed. You were cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Monica Elise Keller and David Charles Merriman. I stared at it for a long time. Like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something sane. Like maybe it said, "We found your dog," or "Here's that casserole dish you forgot." But no, it was exactly what it looked like. She was engaged. To David, the man who helped light the match while she watched me burn. I set the card on the table, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stared out the window like I was auditioning for a moody film about heartbreak and hardwood floors. And then I laughed. Not the broken kind. Not bitter. Just honest. She sent me an invitation. Like I was some character actor in her new life story. A supporting role. A nostalgic nod to the ex-husband, included for the sake of optics or irony. But here's the thing. I had already RSVP'd to this circus weeks ago. She just didn't know it. I picked up my phone. Called Gerald, my lawyer. "Tell me you still have that folder," I said. "You mean the one labeled nuclear?" "That's the one." He didn't even ask why. Just said, "Meet me tomorrow. Same office." "And Adam?" "Yeah, we're something nice." The next morning, I dressed like a man with nothing to prove. Dark jeans, clean boots, and a flannel shirt that still smelled faintly like sawdust and resolve. Gerald had everything laid out on his conference table like a courtroom exhibit. "This," he said, pointing to a stack of printed text and photographs, "is the affair. Timestamped. Confirmed." He moved to the next pile. "These are the financials. Joint accounts, her spending pattern, overlapping with hotel stays. Very convenient." Then he tapped the final folder. "And this is the list of people who will be receiving copies." I scanned the names. Friends. Mutual colleagues. Even Monica's high society aunt who once called me charmingly rustic. "You're sure about this?" Gerald asked. I was sure when she kissed him before our divorce was final. He nodded. "And the party?" "Oh, I'll be there." That caught him off guard. "You're attending?" "Of course," I said, grinning. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The venue was exactly what I expected. White walls, mood lighting, and fake smiles. Monica loved minimalism with a dash of control, same way she loved men, apparently. I walked in like I owned the place. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Someone whispered my name like I'd risen from the dead. And then I saw her. Monica, standing in a sleeveless ivory dress that tried too hard to pretend it wasn't bridal. Her hair curled in that effortless way that actually takes an hour and a curling wand. David stood beside her, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, probably. He looked like a catalog ad for generic happiness. Her eyes met mine. And in that moment, something flickered. Not guilt. Not remorse. Recognition. Like she realized I hadn't come to cry. Or beg. Or throw a scene. No, I came to deliver a gift. I walked right up to her. Calm. Polite. A guest, after all. "Monica," I said, handing her a small box. "What is this?" she asked, voice brittle. "A little something for the bride-to-be." David chuckled awkwardly, already uncomfortable. "Hey, Adam. Good to see you, man. Is it?" He blinked. "I mean, yeah." I smiled. "Good to know." Monica opened the box. Inside, a flash drive. And a card that said, "For when you're ready to remember how this really started." She paled. Just slightly. But I caught it. "I don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly quieter. "Oh, you will," I replied. "So will everyone else." Then I turned. Left my wine untouched. My work was done. That night, the flash drive made its rounds. I didn't leak it publicly. I wasn't a villain. I just sent it quietly, selectively, to those on the periphery of Monica's curated world. Friends who'd been told I was cold, distant, unavailable. Now they had a different perspective. Screenshots, emails, photos. Truth. And just like that, the story changed. I wasn't the jilted ex. I was the survivor of a slow, quiet betrayal. One that started long before Eli showed up. Long before David brought over his first bottle of Pinot. Long before Monica told herself I was safe enough to ignore. She'd built a lie and painted it like art. All I did was shine a better light on it. And that was just the beginning. 2 days after the party, my phone started buzzing. Not from Monica. From the Ripple. See, people love to gossip. But they worship a scandal. Especially when it involves someone who used to host wine tastings and give speeches about emotional authenticity at book clubs. The group texts were lighting up. The Facebook comments, thinly veiled. Even Monica's Pilates instructor, who once asked if I was getting enough protein, posted a cryptic status about betrayal being a dish best served by karma itself. I didn't gloat. Well, not out loud. But inside, I was sipping a very satisfying cup of poetic justice. The fallout didn't hit like an explosion. It rolled in slowly, like a fog that creeps through the cracks in every perfectly curated life Monica had tried to build. That Wednesday, Eli sent me a screenshot. A friend of his had messaged him. Hey, isn't that your dad's ex-wife? People are talking. Grimacing face. Eli added just 2 words. You good? I replied. Better every day. But Monica? She wasn't. She finally called that night. Blocked number. I knew it was her before I even picked up. Adam, she started. No hello. No preamble. Monica, I answered evenly. What did you do? I almost laughed. There it was. Not how could you, just what? The damage had already arrived, so now she wanted the blueprint. I shared the truth, I said. You shared private conversations. You weaponized my mistakes. You married a man before divorcing the last. If you're worried about optics, maybe don't treat vows like a dress rehearsal. There was silence on the line, then a sharp inhale. You've humiliated me. No, I said. You did that. I just stopped covering for you. You have no idea what you've started. She was right. I didn't. Because what came next wasn't rage or retaliation. It was something far more uncomfortable. Reality. Apparently, David had questions. And when the flash drive landed in his inbox, courtesy of a concerned mutual friend, thanks, Gerald, he watched the whole affair unfold from a timeline that didn't match the story Monica fed him. He saw the timestamps. The sweet nothings dated months before she'd asked me for space. The messages where she mocked his hair behind his back. His gel smells like cheap cologne and teenage confidence. The hotel receipt she said was for a business retreat, when it was just her and a spa package she billed to his card. He called her a liar, then a narcissist, then something I won't repeat, because even I have my standards. She moved out of his place that weekend, back in with her sister. And now, she wasn't just the woman who'd left her husband. She was the woman who'd left 2 men, each believing they were her future, and neither realizing they were just stepping stones to her ego's next project. I didn't celebrate much, but I did upgrade my Spotify playlist for the occasion. Track 1, Survivor. Destiny's Child. Because, come on, you have to lean in a little. I spent that week focusing on what came next. The kind of rebuilding that doesn't come with blueprints or second opinions. I fixed up the house, repainted the hallway, got new curtains, replaced the table Monica once said was too farmhouse. Turns out, I like farmhouse. I even bought a dog. Not out of loneliness, out of stubborn joy. He's a golden retriever. I named him Harvey after the storm. The neighbors waved again. People I hadn't spoken to in years dropped by with. I heard S and good for you, S wrapped in casseroles and thinly veiled relief that someone finally said what everyone else had been thinking. Eli started coming over more often. We built furniture, burned steaks, watched old Bond movies and argued about which one was underrated. It's Timothy Dalton, don't at me. One night, as we sat on the porch watching Harvey chase his own shadow, Eli asked, "Do you miss her?" I didn't answer right away. Not her, I finally said. I miss the version of me who believed her. He nodded. Didn't push. Smart kid. That's when I realized this wasn't a comeback story. It wasn't about healing or revenge or proving her wrong. It was about stepping out of a shadow I didn't even know I'd been standing in. And yeah, the silence still came sometimes. Late at night, when the house got too still and the bed felt too wide. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It was honest. And that kind of quiet doesn't haunt. It hums. 3 weeks after the party, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. Handwritten, stamped, and slightly smudged like someone cried while sealing it. The return address was Monica's sister. Inside, for lines. You made your point. He left. Are you happy now? She's not eating. I folded it up, placed it back in the envelope. Didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd already given enough. Words, years, apologies I didn't owe. I wasn't about to send sympathy into a house that treated my pain like a punchline. The next day, Eli showed up with 2 milkshakes. Vanilla or chocolate? He asked, grinning. Depends. What did you break? He laughed. Nothing. Yet. We sat on the porch while Harvey chewed on what used to be my best pair of boots. Mom used to say you were boring, Eli said suddenly. But you're not. Gee, thanks. I mean, she made you sound like oatmeal in a human suit. But you're more like brick. Solid. Doesn't move until someone hits it too many times. That was the first time I felt something like pride when it came to my marriage falling apart. She called me boring. Safe. Predictable. But he saw it now. The kid. The son I never knew I had. I was the house that didn't fall. And she was the match who got bored when nothing burned. A few days later, Monica asked to meet. Neutral ground. Again. A coffee shop with overpriced muffins and succulents in every corner. She looked smaller. Not physically. Just worn. Like someone whose spotlight had gone out and now she was learning how to sit in the dark again. David's gone, she said. I nodded. My sister kicked me out. Another nod. She waited, maybe for pity, maybe for fire. I gave her neither. I didn't expect you to actually do it, she said quietly. Do what? Leave. Stay gone. Tell people. Build a life without me. That's what leaving means, Monica. She blinked, fast. Her fingers clutched the coffee cup like it might steady her. I thought I'd miss the version of us we used to be, she said. But I don't. Same. I miss the version of me I was with you. That one stung. Not because it was romantic. Because it was true. I had made her feel safe. Important. Centered. And she used that comfort like a doormat. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. Do you hate me? I looked at her, really looked. At the woman I once built a life with. At the one who turned it into scaffolding for her next act. No, I said. You're not worth the energy. She flinched. That was the last thing I ever said to her. It's funny. People think revenge is a plate of drama, served hot and loud. But the cleanest kind? It's simple. You disappear. You move on so thoroughly, so completely, that the person who tried to break you can't even find a crack to crawl back into. No fire. No screaming. Just silence. I didn't publish her messages. I didn't call her job or send out the flash drive again. That would have been noise. Instead, I kept living. I finished the bookshelf with Eli. Bought new boots Harvey couldn't destroy. Took a trip upstate just to see if I still liked traveling alone. Turns out, I do. And when I opened a small manila envelope one morning containing finalized divorce papers and a brief note from her lawyer, I didn't feel anger or regret. Just closure. Final. Undeniable. Perfect. I framed one page. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. Right there in my hallway, next to a photo of Eli and me building that bookshelf, hangs a legal document with one line highlighted. This marriage is hereby dissolved. It's not a scar. It's a birthmark. Because that was the day I stopped being someone's safety net and became my own.